Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Okay, great. So just for clarity, again, this is Track 3 Community Administrator and Program Manager Community of Practice. Only Track 3 or the Accelerator program should be part of this Community of Practice. So just want to make sure that all of you are here because you are part of the Community of Practice. Thanks again for joining. We had a very productive conversation in our last community of practice meeting. So the way we were doing this community of practice is given where the cycle is, the pre-apprentice life cycle with your participants, the cycle for your program implementation. Those are some of the discussions that we'll have during this meeting. So just wanted to put that out there for all of you. If you don't mind, Jeff, going on to the next slide. So as you know, I'm Norman Ruano, by the way, Deputy Director of the Office of Illinois Works, and I'm the person that engages with you during this community of practice. With me today is Jeff Doolittle, who is one of our professional development team members, and he is providing the support for us, both for the chat and in the rest of the activities during this community practice. We also have Dan, who is also helping out with this particular community of practice. We will be using Mentimeter during this community of practice. So if you don't mind either using the QR code and the Menti code that is being provided, 31317161. What are the odds that the same number is going to have 4 ones, but that number has 4 ones? 31317161. If you don't mind joining so that you are engaged as part of our interactivity today, including the evaluation at the end of this community of practice meeting. Moving on to the next slide, Jeff. So if you don't mind, just, unmute your line. This is a small group, and we like it to be very interactive. Again, unmute your line, your name, the organization or agency you represent, and where you are located within the state of Illinois. So if you don't mind, please go ahead.
Dominic Watson, Springfield Project. We're located in Central Illinois, Springfield specifically.
Thanks for joining, Dominic. In fact, I'm probably half a block away from you today or half a mile, because I'm here in Springfield visiting our team in Springfield. So welcome to our community practice today.
We would love to have you stop by.
Yes, in fact, probably the next time I come back, we'll structure a tour of your facility with Monica Pruitt, who is your grant manager, who's here with us in the conversation. So we'll definitely circle back about that. Okay. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
Okay. Who's next?
Melissa Brown, Eaton Career Institute, and we're in Forest Park, Illinois.
Thanks for joining, Melissa. Who's next?
Aaron Ashley, Spark 618, and we are down in Carbondale, Illinois, at the bottom of the state.
That's great. That's great. All the way at the tip. Yes. Thanks for joining, Aaron. Who's next?
James Wood, Ascending Knowledge. We're in Harvey, Illinois.
Thanks for joining, Mr. Wood. Who's next? Okay, so thank you very much all for joining. As I mentioned,
Mr. Romano?
Yes.
Tamala Hughes is also trying to join the meeting.
And is she having any technological issues?
She didn't have she didn't receive a link, so I shared mine with her.
Okay. Let us know if she's not able to join with that information. And then we'll do some troubleshooting.
I'm in, sir. Thank you.
I'm sorry? You were able to join, great. Okay, great. Okay, so as we have mentioned in previous conversations, this community of practice was designed specifically for accelerator programs with the ultimate goal of sharing some best practices that not only we have learned as practitioners of workforce development on the ground. If you don't mind, Pamela, muting your line, that would be great. We have a little bit of background noise. Um, so, sharing best practices from us as workforce practitioners. I mentioned earlier that I've been doing workforce development now, believe it or not, for almost 30 years, most of it on the ground, running programming with different colleges, community colleges, universities, but also in partnership with a lot of nonprofit organizations. I've partnered my career before joining the state probably with 250, 300 nonprofit organizations in the metro area, running programming together in every imaginable area. So we obviously, there are some practices in workforce development that work, others not so well, and we want to make sure we share those practices with you. Today specifically, and also obviously to learn from each other, because you bring also a breadth of knowledge and experience to Illinois Works and to workforce development, and want to make sure that we hear from you also what you're doing. Last time we met, it was very interactive, people talking about what they were doing, what worked for them. We want today to be the same, okay? Very interactive. Make sure that if you have any questions or comments, you can unmute your line so that we are able to learn from each other as we move forward. Here are the objectives that we have that we want to discuss today. One is discussing what does it mean to have successful completing participant requirements. In other words, what does Illinois Works look at when you're trying to complete someone? They went through your program. What do we look at when we're trying to say they're a completer, they are a graduate of Illinois Works? Also discuss some of the practices for improving your transition outcomes. At the end of the year, we're going to be moving into closeout activities. We'll discuss some of the closeout mistakes that we've seen in the past after dealing with a lot of grantees in the last 5 years. Understand how completion and transition impacts your reimbursement and your renewal. Particularly, I want to make sure that we talk about reimbursement because obviously those are the finances of your program, but also the ability for you to renew your program as we come into the end of the program year. What does that mean for you if you get renewed, okay? There are a couple of paths for accelerator programs. And then building stronger relationships with registered apprenticeship programs, keeping in mind, obviously, that registered apprenticeship programs and employers look differently in different parts of the state. If you're in the metro area, there's a huge concentration of apprenticeship programs of every imaginable type, also of employers. But if you are somewhere else in the state, that may look a little differently, right? And in how you can maximize the partnership with our career services team as they outreach to also employers and apprenticeship programs. So those are the goals and the expectations today. Do you have any questions about these goals, what our objectives are for this community of practice today? Okay, if there are no questions, I don't know.
No questions in chat at this point, Dr. Ruano.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So let's move on to the next one then. So one of the key things that it's very important in, Illinois Works as a semi-structured workforce development model has a lot of guidance in different stages of your programming, but we always use the pre-apprentice life cycle as our guide. Think about it, as the roadmap that you need to follow as you engage with individuals as you deliver services, right? And you will notice that a variety of these items start to mature, start to get more complicated as you go through the cycle. For instance, once you bring in your cohorts, and my understanding is that all of you are either presently running cohorts, are about to finish your cohorts, or some of you, not sure, maybe getting to the close of that cycle of training, okay? That's not where the whole thing ends for Illinois Works, okay? wraparound services, some of those wraparound services can get very complex. Some of that training obviously can get very complex. You know, some of those student support services can get very complex. Why? Because some people, not all your participants have the same levels of knowledge and experience. Some of them might have been in school 20 years ago. Some of them finished school a year ago, right? So maybe some of them need more tutoring in math and test taking. Maybe some of them need more tutoring in some of the areas of your program, maybe related to power tools, maybe related to blueprint reading, maybe related to shop math, right? So the complexity of this is based on the different needs that individuals bring, right? But they all need to be able, at the end of the day, to be able to get their certifications, be able to get the training they need, be able to be ready and able to apply to apprenticeship programs and go into employment. That's where program completion comes in, right? So we're going to talk a lot about program completion. What are some of the key things that you should be paying close attention to ensure that as you put in your cohort and they went through your training, you're able to successfully complete them and get the credit, not only in terms of compliance, but financial credit for all of those individuals that went into your program. So using this pre-apprentice life cycle, it's always going to be a good way of you knowing where you are and what the different activities are that you need to be focusing at a particular moment of time, right? So if you had not started your cohort, well, looking at outreach, looking at the application process, look at the intake process, it's where you need it to be. Once they go into training, then you got to look at about wraparound services, student support services. You got to look at training and what is it that you have to provide in order to have completers, right? After that, transition services. What are those transition services, and what type of follow-up should you be doing with your graduates once they finish your program? So let's move on to the next slide, Jeff. And as I mentioned earlier, please, if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to unmute your line and let's have a conversation about it. Yes, Tamala, if you have a question, please go ahead.
My apologies. Tamala with Ascendant Knowledge. So my question in regards to the life cycle, if we already have our second cohort filled, what would you recommend the best practice be for us preparing to come out of the accelerated program and go into the regular flow of Illinois work pre-apprenticeship, for lack of better terms? My apologies.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an excellent question. So I mentioned earlier, there are two paths that you would have at the time of renewal. We start doing renewal activities in September, October, and November. You have a 3-month cycle there to be able to be offered renewal, and it's all based on your compliance scores. So you will notice that so far you have received a monthly compliance report, right? So your monthly compliance report tells you where your compliance score is, and it also tells you what to do to improve on your compliance score, right? So it has a worksheet that would detail any type of missing data or incorrect data for each of the individuals that you had in your program, what you need to do to correct it. The more you deal with those flags, your grant manager, your programmatic grant manager issues every single month, your compliance score will then start to go up. You need to meet a certain threshold for compliance in order to get renewed. And there are 2 levels of renewal. The highest level of renewal is that if you reach that threshold, the highest level of renewal would allow you to renew without conditions. And for an accelerator program, if they get offered renewal without conditions, that means that you can go into our regular operating tracks. And we have 2 regular operating tracks, track 2 and track 1. If you're coming out of the accelerator program, you will go into our track 2 if you reach the highest level of renewal without conditions. What that means is in track 2, you'll be able to run a larger program, typically 50 individuals, 2 cohorts, typically a funding level of about $500,000 to $550,000, and you would still have to go through some coaching, up to 10 hours of coaching and some other developmental activities, but it's not, you're no longer in the accelerator program. You would have graduated into the accelerator program. Now, if on the other hand, when we do the renewal cycle, we offer you renewal, but it's conditional renewal. You didn't hit that ideal renewal threshold with your compliance, then you would still be offered another opportunity to stay in the accelerator program for another year for you to be able to continue to polish your program so that then you can graduate potentially the next year if you hit that ideal renewal threshold. So that's how this works, but it's important that your compliance score really reflects what you're required to do so that when you get to that renewal cycle, you can be offered a renewal without conditions. Tamala, did I answer your question?
Thank you for describing that in the way that you did. I think what I need to be more clear about is, so should we wait until around the November timeframe to start recruiting for additional students, or should we continue our outreach and create a wait list for these members that's waiting to go into the Illinois Work Pre-Apprenticeship Training?
Yeah, so most of our programs have a wait list, and I think that that's a good idea and it's a good practice. You can continue because outreach to get an ideal cohort, and an ideal cohort is a cohort of individuals that match this program, right? And by matching, I mean, do they really want to go into construction? Do they have the ability after they finish the program to be ready and able to enter an apprenticeship program, a employment in construction, right? So those are the ideal candidates you want. There are a lot of times when what you will notice is a lot of people join and want to be part of it, and then once you do an interview, once they go through the intake process, you're like, they're not a very good match. And believe me, I've seen it all, right? I mean, we've trained almost 6,000 people with Illinois Works so far, from people that that they really just want to be a mechanic, or someone that just wants to open their small business, a sandwich shop, to someone that just wants to be a chef, to someone that just wants to go into the military. And those are all great endeavors, and we definitely support them. And I encourage you that when you have individuals that come to you like that you refer them to programs that would address their needs, and so that they can be supported in their goals. But if they don't want to make a career in construction in the trades, if they don't want to have employment in construction in the trades, they should not be accepted into Illinois Works. We should only accept individuals that really want to make a career in construction in the trades, and we should support those individuals 100%. Okay, so as we move more now into the more structure, the more complex aspects of Illinois Works, once you have them in training and they have to complete and they have to transition, there's something that we really have to keep in mind, okay? Illinois Works is not about graduating people. That's only one of our benchmarks. Illinois Works is really about getting people careers in construction in the trades. It's not even about a job. It's about a career. It's a life-changing, community-changing, economy-changing careers, right? People that can really go into these apprenticeship programs, be it 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, make a career, get the benefits, get a pension, be able to move through different levels, right? And if they're interested, open their construction company in the future. We've heard a lot of our graduates that talk about that. But that's it. That's the ultimate outcome of Illinois Works. Without that ultimate outcome, Illinois Works does not exist. It will not be around. We are only here to ensure individuals make a career. That's what we call the primary outcome, a career in construction in the trades. In order for them to make a career in construction in the trades, they need to be able to successfully complete our program. Okay? And successfully completing our program is not starting one day and being there the last day. There are different things they have to be able to do to complete our program. They got to pass all the modules. They got to be present a certain amount of time. They have to academically perform at a certain level. They have to get their certifications, right? We also need to make sure that they're transitioned, because graduating is not enough. Being able to successfully complete is not enough. We need to proactively give them transition services, meaning which programs do they want to apply to, which apprenticeship programs they want to go to. How are we supporting them? When are they applying? Do we need for us to pay for their application fees? We are finding out nowadays that a lot of times once they apply and get accepted, there are initiation fees that could be $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. We need to support them with that. They need to have a driver's license, in order to be a completer of Illinois Works. We need to support them with that, right? And all of that goes towards our performance outcomes. You will look at your grant agreement, and it talks about enrollment, completion, and transitions, and there are metrics attached to each of those. And then we have a closeout metric there that is also very important. I'll get to it later on, but those are the 4 metrics of Illinois Works, right? Enrollment, completion, transitions, and we pay at a certain level for each of those metrics because we want to make sure that we're hitting those metrics. Without those outcomes, we don't have participants making a career in construction in the trades. This is not easy work, okay? It's complex work, but it's doable if we do it systematically and we do it well. One of the key things I want to highlight is documentation. Because we are a performance-based model, without you documenting what you're doing and having the evidence for what you're doing in terms of enrollments, completions, transitions, and even closeout, this model doesn't work, right? Documentation, we verify the information, we verify the documents, because if we're going to produce outcomes for individuals, it is through documentation and verification that we're able to see those outcomes, okay? So this is in a nutshell what Illinois Works is all about, right? It's not your traditional workforce development model. You go and do things, you hope they graduate, and then you hope they find employment. That's not what this is about. This is starting with a career as the outcome for the individual, and then everything else that we do supports that outcome. That's the system is designed to do that, okay? Next slide, Jeff. Okay, before anyone can be marked as complete, and here's the thing, okay? You might have heard, or you may have experience with programming, and believe me, I did programming on the ground for 20 years, used $60-70 million worth of funding of every imaginable type, okay? And you go into reporting and some of these databases and you say, I did this, I did that, I did that. And then they're like, okay, good. That's not the way it works in Illinois Works. The IWRS reporting system, which is a real-time reporting system, allows you to report to us your activities as an individual is going through the pre-apprentice life cycle, right? Did they complete their curriculum? And by that, we mean that they successfully complete their curriculum. Did they attend the required number of hours? You need to upload your rosters to demonstrate that. Did they have to do makeup hours? Life happens, right? Things happen to people. And as a result, they may not be able to attend the number of hours required to pass a module. Well, they should be given the opportunity to make up hours, right? The best programs that I have seen out there do typically Friday morning as the makeup time for hours, and the makeup hours should be done with the instructors, right? I know of programs that do makeup hours Saturday mornings. And why is it that they do it Saturday mornings? Because people that join these programs a lot of times have part-time jobs, sometimes 2 part-time jobs. And their Saturday morning is a time when they're able to make time available for most of the people that may need to do makeup hours. So Saturday morning, people that missed hours do makeup hours, okay? Or they may have to take the assessments they didn't pass. They took the assessments for the modules and they didn't pass them. in parentheses, I want to make sure that we're very clear, okay? So the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program is a training program. It's a workforce development model that includes a very strong training component. As such, for all the modules in your curricula, you submitted your curricula to us and said, this is what I'm going to teach. All of those modules need to have must-have assessments, meaning tests. At the end of the module, all of those modules should have tests that individuals take and they must pass, okay? It's vital they do that, okay? They develop testing skills. That's how we know if they're learning or not. That's how we know if they're prepared to go into this. The worst thing that we can do is one of our participants applies, we say they're all ready to go. They apply to an apprenticeship program, and then in the apprenticeship program, they start to struggle because apprenticeship programs have a training component and they have a work component. They may be doing very well on the work component, but how about the training component? Are they succeeding in that training component? The pre-apprenticeship program is preparing our graduates, our individuals, to be able to deal not only with the employment component, but also with the educational, the training component of an apprenticeship program. This is not us just doing whatever just because it looks good. This is us prepping them so that they can succeed in what they need to do once they go into an apprenticeship program. Then the other thing that is very important is that they earn the required certifications. If you're using MC3, they need to get an MC3 certification. Absolutely, they need to get it, right? If you're using ICCB, they need to get an ICCB certificate. Or if you're using the NCCER system, then they need to get an NCCER course certification, right? They also need to get an OSHA construction certification, and they also need to get their first aid CPR certification. And let me tell you, I've seen it all when it comes to this, okay? When it comes to OSHA, I've seen, some of our grantees give general industry OSHA certifications. That's not the required Illinois Work certification. The required Illinois Work certification for OSHA is the OSHA construction certification, 10-hour construction certification, because that's the one that applies to the work that they're going to do in a career in construction. The first day CPR, I've seen it all, We've seen participants that have gotten baby certification. So, there's different types of first day CPR certifications. You need to give them one for adults. They're not going to be dealing here with babies. They're not working in early childhood education or daycare centers. They're going to be working out there at job sites with other adults. As a result, what they need to get is a first aid CPR adult certification. And then I've seen all kinds of mixtures. They do the first aid one and then they give them the AED certification. Well, that's good. If you want to add an AED certification to the first aid CPR certification that we require, you can do that. Most job sites do not have an AED. But if you want to add that one, that's fine. But you absolutely need to have the first aid and CPR certification. And it needs to be an actual hands-on certification. It cannot be a video that they watch for an hour, okay? These need to be hands-on certifications where they develop the skills. We've seen it all when it comes to that, and we've had to make grantees actually redo their first aid CPR certifications because they didn't have the right ones. The baby certifications do not work, and definitely a weird combination of, let's say, CPR AED or first aid AED is not going to cut it. It needs to be first aid CPR. And if you want to add AED, you certainly can. It's not required, okay? And then when it comes to the stipends, let me tell you, this is one of the key things that trigger a lot of monitoring events for Illinois Works and us doing monitoring of different grantees. Stipends are the only wraparound service required by the Illinois Works law. We can provide a variety of wraparound services and student support services, but the stipends must absolutely be provided. And they must be provided as stated in our grantee manual. They must be performance-based, and they must follow a very particular policy related on how they get paid. we spend about, probably my estimate is about $4 or $5 million a year throughout the state of Illinois paying stipends, and they must be properly documented in IWRS. And you also need to have a clear stipend policy that you're using to pay those stipends. They must be paid when they have to be paid, and again, properly documented, because this triggers a lot of monitoring events for us at Illinois Works, because it's law mandated, it's legally required. And then the one thing I will tell you, and this is a best practice that I would really hope that your programs, if they're not following them now, they should following them from now until you're part of Illinois Works. Okay, your IWRS records must be complete. They must be accurate. There is a mistake that I see in a lot of Illinois Works programs that ends up being very complicated, not only for our grant managers, but also for the programs, okay? Your data entry in IWRS should be done by one individual. You should have a data entry coordinator. We require that in our guidance. That person should be fully trained on how to do data entry in IWRS. You should also have a data quality management system. That is a different set of eyes that is looking at the data that is being entered by your data entry coordinator, maybe the program manager, maybe the administrator. I would recommend it at least twice a month. For sure, that data should be looked at before we pull data. If you look at your compliance report, we let you know when we're going to be pulling data for compliance in the next month. Typically, we pull it the first Friday of the month. Before that, whoever is doing the data quality management should look at your data and should make corrections of any mistakes that you're making, okay? Because that would allow our grant managers to look at your data and say, okay, credit for this, credit for that, credit for that, no flags for this, no flags for that, okay, credit for a completion here, credit for a enrollment there, credit for a transition there. If you don't do data quality management, our grant managers have to look at all that data and then issue all kinds of flags on your data. It becomes then more complicated for you, and it becomes complicated for us, because that will decrease your compliance score, but it also will decrease the amount of money you have earned. We call it remax, for us to be able to pay your expenses. The more flags you have on individuals, the less we can verify for you. The less flags you have, the more we can verify for you, the more your compliance score goes up, the more your remax, which is the amount of money available to pay you, goes up. This is key. Your data entry coordinator is one of the key individuals in your team. You should have someone that is trained, that is very competent in doing data entry and data management. And then you should definitely have a different set of eyes, which we call our data management system, at least once a month, recommended 2 or 3 times a month, to clean up your data before we look at it for verification. Are there any questions or comments related to these best practices for completion?
Nothing in chat at this point, Dr. Ruano.
Thank you, Jeff.
I had a question about the driver's license component. Is
Yeah.
that something that needs to be uploaded into IWRS for proof of license before the program is over for them to be complete? Because so we took someone in our program and it's like, the questions, are you willing to get a license? Yes. So we have started the process, but it was their license was taken away, and so there's a long path to get back, but they're doing what they need to. But how does that work out?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, Aaron. And I will tell you, it's when you look at a cohort, a lot of people will come with a clean driver's license, no problem, right? Some people, particularly the younger people that we see in some of our programs, come with the need to finish the process to get a driver's license, right? And then we also see some people, not a lot of them, but some people that come with a lot of barriers with their driver's license, right? So when you accept individuals like that, or when you find out through your intake process that those individuals have a lot of barriers, what you really need to find out is, what are those barriers? Can those issues be cured in the process, right? If they cannot be cured in the process, then the question is, should there be some other support for those individuals, helping with some other, referrals in the community for them to be more ready and able by the time they join our program? I'll tell you the reason why we included the driver's license as a requirement for Illinois Works. That's actually a new requirement this year, was because in our conversations with labor and with the unions throughout the state, that was one of the first things that they said. We've had a lot of issues with your graduates coming to us without a driver's license. And without that, they cannot go to job sites. So as a result, the ability for them to apply and then even be able to get placed, it goes down significantly, right? So they requested from us, and DCO agreed to their request, that them having a driver's license by the time they graduate should be a requirement. So just giving you some context there. But here's what happens, okay? So let's assume that, and Illinois Works does have a field in IWRS for you to upload that documentation that the grant managers will provide. But let's assume that you're working with a hard case like that, and you make sure you enter good case notes in that person's profile, so that we're fully aware of what's going on. It may get to a point where you may get what we call a conditional completion, right?
Okay.
And a conditional completion is, we gave you completion credit, and that was the only thing that was pending. You gave us a good case. We gave you a conditional completion. By the time closeout happens, that must have been dealt with, okay? Because if that doesn't happen, if you haven't addressed whatever that condition was by closeout, and typically closeout happens in February or March of the next year. So closeout for this program, we'll start closeout activities in December, but final closeout will not be completed until February or March of next year, right?
Okay. Perfect.
By then, that must have been addressed, because otherwise the grant manager, when they do closeout activities with you, they may take that conditional credit back.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, we just she's just one of our participants. Just there's a hearing and it's all kinds of stuff. But okay, that is good information. It just I guess it would have just that wasn't something that was flagged through the questions. You know what I mean? It was just, hey, do you have a license? No, are you willing to get one? Yes. So if they don't give us that other information up front, this is something we found out about a couple weeks ago. So we're like, okay, and this is one of our best students, and it's really hard because she's like, well, I'll drop out if you guys aren't going to get the credit. And you're like, no, like we will figure it out. It's like you are great. We want you here. So just trying to, figure that out. So, okay. Thank you. This was really helpful.
There's definitely flexibility in the system. What I would also recommend, Aaron, is when you're going through the interview process and something like that comes up, you may want to dig into it, right? To see if it's feasible for the program to address whatever situation they have going, right?
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. And I know for us, we're definitely learning a lot of things that we're like, woo, cohort 2 is not going to be like this, but I mean, it's been going well, but it's you definitely learn, and you're like, okay, well, that's not going to happen again.
That's the reason why you're in an accelerator program with a smaller number of people in your cohorts, because it's a lot easier to deal with issues like that if you have 10 or 12 people in a cohort, if you're running 2 cohorts, than if you have 2 full cohorts of 25 or 28 people, one after the other, right? I mean, it gets complicated. That's the reason why the accelerator programs allows for smaller programs, smaller cohorts, so that you can deal with situations like that, right?
Yeah.
Melissa, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a comment, and then I also have a question. For best practices, one of the things that we found out, and I want to share, my grant manager shared with me, is that exhibits, when you're creating your forms, have to stay exactly the same, but with templates, you may have a little bit of leeway, because when we created some of our forms, we kind of aligned them with some of the things that are internal. And so it was a little different. And so we had to redo them and didn't get credit in the first review because we had created our own instead of following the exhibit exactly, even though all of the information was included. So that was a lesson learned that we will not do again. And so that was real important for us to find out.
Well, that's good you're sharing. If you don't mind, Melissa, I'll add something to that, and then we'll go back to your question. So for all of the accelerator grantees, so our grantee manual is not your traditional grantee manual where everything in the manual is just guidance, right? We have in our grantee manual a lot of information that is helpful for your program, including templates that you can use and customize for your purposes. When it comes to the exhibits are the required guidance, right? And there's a reason for that, right? I'll take, for instance, the commitment agreement, right? That's an exhibit. So the commitment agreement contains a lot of legal language that allows Illinois Works to be able to do a lot of things for our graduates. If that document gets modified and the language that we have in there doesn't make it to whatever the participant signs, you cannot even share their information with us through IWRS. Is that problematic? Because there are federal laws and state laws that protect the graduates from their information being shared with us, and then us sharing the information with NIU for evaluation purposes, or University of Chicago, who we work with also for evaluation purposes, right? So those exhibits, and that's just an example, those exhibits have key vital information that is needed for us to be able to operate the program. Now, the templates, those we created as tools for people to use. Some of our grantees don't even use some of those templates because they have their own. They have their own documents. They have their own policies. We created templates more for newer programs, for programs that are still developing, so that they have something to work with. If they make some adjustments, it's fine. But when it comes to the exhibits, we cannot, because those are required documents that protect us all legally for us to be able to do what we do, right? So anyways, good point, Melissa, but you also had a question, right?
Yeah, and it was kind of tied also to the screen before. Our group, we did a visit to the Carpenters Apprenticeship Program last week, and we found out that they're not even going to accept applications anymore this year. They won't accept any new applications until 2027. Of course, with our students, we've asked them for their first, second, third choice, but how is that addressed in transition if they can't even apply until the next year?
Yeah, so when it comes to the apprenticeship programs, there's a lot of different dynamics that happen, right? Some programs have an annual application process. Some programs have 2 or 3 application processes throughout the year. Some programs do it every 2 years, right? So that's the reason why it's so important for us to ensure that graduates or individuals that are in your program choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different options, right? And apply to different options, right? Because of those dynamics. What's really key here, Melissa, and this is also important for all grantees, particularly for accelerators, all of that information you're learning, you really need to make sure your transition coordinator learns that very well, so that as they're providing career services and transition services to graduates, they can coach them about, this is what you want to do, but this is what's available, right? This is what's open at this particular moment of time. This is how many people they may accept. So I encourage you to apply to that, but also apply to these other 2 or 3 things. And they should apply before they graduate. They shouldn't apply once they graduate. If they applied once they graduate, I can tell you, once a particular individual disengages, it's very hard to engage them again. But it's those local dynamics, right? Wherever you're located, learning what the landscape is of apprenticeship programs, when they open, how they open, what the process is, how much does it cost, what are the different steps. That is all part of what your transition coordinator needs to be doing to help your graduates understand what their options are. Here's the other option though, Melissa. There may be other carpentry programs, maybe in a different location where you are, that they can apply to. I encourage people to do that because it's like college, right? Yeah, you may want to go to this city, but that didn't take you, but the other city took you. Maybe it's not the best place that you wanted to go to, but hey, if you're going to get training and you're going to get experience, why not, right? We need to encourage people to open up their horizons, not only in terms of apprenticeship programs, but also geographically, right? Where the opportunities are. So a bunch of carpentry apprenticeship programs throughout the state of Illinois.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? Let's talk a little bit about attendance here, okay? Because this is another issue that triggers a lot of monitoring for Illinois Works, okay? And I want to level set with you about this, okay? Attendance for workforce development programs is not a nice thing to do. It's a huge necessity, okay? Because let's just simulate some of these things that attendance dictates, okay? One is if your attendance says that an individual was there in that week for 15 hours instead of 20, why would your stipends pay them for 20 hours? If your attendance, if your roster say that an individual only attended in OSHA 10 for 5 hours, they're supposed to be there 10 hours. That's OSHA requirements. How did they get an OSHA 10 certification? When we're doing verification, we're looking at all of that. And at times when our grant managers look at your rosters and your rosters say, you know, they weren't there for, you know, I don't know, the testing module, or they weren't there for the sexual harassment module based on your roster. But then you entered in IWRS that they were there for that module and how many hours they were there. And then your stipends, you paid them stipends for that day. Our grant managers are required to flag that and file a complaint so that it can be investigated. So attendance, it's vital, right? You know, that's how we determine the stipends. That's how we determine are they eligible to graduate? How much stipends should have they gotten, you know? Should they have received their certifications or not? We look at it during their compliance review, and ultimately you could be going through a long monitoring event just because your attendance, it's all over the place, and it's all over the place both on your actual rosters, and it's all over the place in IWRS. That should all match. And if it all matches, you know, then you shouldn't have any problems with that, okay? I will tell you, there's a temptation to say, well, you know, let's just make the roster match whatever we're saying in IWRS. Not a good idea, okay? When we do monitoring, we talk to students. We ask them if they were there. We ask other students, was Johnny there? So not a good idea. Make sure your rosters are very faithful to whatever happened. You yourself as an administrator have to sign and certify those rosters, right? It's not a good idea not to do that. Whenever we do monitoring and then we discover things that are not supposed to be, we're just going to pull back any enrollment, completion, transition credits we might have given you for those students. It may be a big loss on that individual student, right? So I really encourage you to take your attendance rosters very seriously, you know, and ensure that they faithfully reflect what happened. And if an individual is not showing up the way they should, believe me, if we say they're a graduate and then they go into an apprenticeship program, they're not going to make it. They're not going to make it in employment either. It's better to deal with those situations for what they are. Talk to them and say, hey, I need you to stabilize your attendance. You'll be able to do some makeup time here for some of your hours and some of your tests. But unless you stabilize your attendance, you may be dismissed from the program. And believe me, we have some grantees that dismiss people. They have a dismissal. You're required to have a dismissal policy. It's better to do that than to start, making rosters reflect things that didn't happen, right? And we've seen it in these last 5 years. Some grantees do that, and we catch it because we check everything. We check rosters, we check whatever you entered in IWRS, we check your stipends, and when things don't add up, then we end up doing monitoring, and then it's I was trained in my 20s. My mentor used to be in charge of auditing for the FBI, and then later on went to work for the company as a senior vice president of the company that I used to work for in medical technology. And he always used to say that the best way to prepare for monitoring and auditing is just doing things right when you do them. If you do them right when you do them, you don't have to worry about anything. If you don't do them right, someone will eventually find out. So he says it's not a good idea. Just do them right from the very beginning, and then you don't have to worry about it. Big lesson I learned in my 20s. It's been a while, and believe me, it has helped me a lot. I've gone myself through about 50 monitoring and auditing events for the programming that I've ran. All of my career, federal, state, local, private, I mean, you name it, every imaginable thing. Never had a problem. You just do it right from the very beginning, and you should be fine. Any questions about attendance?
Nothing in chat.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so when it comes to risk, okay, so proactivity is going to be very important, okay? Proactively do things, okay? Proactively deal with things. If you're trying to do things by the time closeout comes, it's too late. And I'll tell you why that is too late, okay? If you proactively do the things that the grant requires that you do, your grant managers are going to be able to see that on a monthly basis as they pull compliance for reporting. And we do monthly compliance reporting. And they're going to be able to give you guidance. They're going to be able to give you technical assistance. They're going to be able to give you a monthly compliance report where they show what the issues are, what needs to be dealt with, right? And if you proactively deal with the issues, with the flags that they're giving you, if you have questions, you don't know how to deal with it, meet with your grant manager, ask for a TA session. They'll be more than happy to do one-on-one TA sessions with you to explain all this stuff. But if you do that proactively, that means that by the time renewal comes in September, October, November, you're going to be in great shape. Maybe not ideal, but in good shape, okay? We have grantees that do that so systematically that by the time, renewal comes, they're operating on a 90, 95, sometimes even over 100% compliance by the time renewal comes, because the way they deal with things is very proactive. If you instead choose to do a reactive process, you will have to do it anyways through closeout. Your closeout may be very painful for us and for you because you will have way too many things to address, but it will have to be taken care of regardless. And by then, you would have delayed your financial remax because flags were not addressed. So we couldn't verify enrollment for you. We couldn't verify completion for you. We couldn't verify transitions for you, okay? So it's vital that you use a proactive approach month by month. Here is the best practice, okay? I'm going to take Edwin here because Edwin is on the call. Edwin is one of our programmatic grant managers. Let's assume he's your grant manager. And he sends you, typically by the third week of the month, he sends you your monthly compliance report. And your monthly compliance report says your monthly compliance score right now is 65%. 65%, it's not a great compliance score. It needs improvement. You need improvement. You got to be at minimum at 75%, but you're close, okay? And then you're like, what do I need to do to bring this up to 75%? Well, Edwin would have sent you with your compliance report your monthly compliance worksheet. And the worksheet for each of the individuals that you have in your program may show flags. They're all in red. They'll say for this individual, you don't have high school or GD or high set evidence. For this individual, you did not complete the career assessment. For this individual, there are issues with your interview sheets, right? Or for this individual, they didn't successfully pass the OSHA 10 certification, they need some makeup hours, or the attendance on your rosters doesn't match what you have on the stipends for this individual. If you address those when you get it from Edwin, okay, you have typically a 2-week cycle from the time you get the report to the time we pull compliance again to address flags. If you proactively deal with those flags, by the time we pull the data again the next month, Edwin will be able to see that you corrected, let's say 50% of the flags, or for an individual, you corrected all the flags. For another individual, you corrected most of the flags, maybe one flag is pending. And he may be able to give you a conditional verification for that one that has one flag left, and then he verifies the one where you clear all the flags, right? If you take advantage of that 2-week window between the time you get your monthly compliance report to the time we pull data again and deal with those flags, you will, again, as I mentioned earlier, increase your compliance score, increase the amount of money your program is generating. And as importantly, when closeout time comes, you will not have too many things to address in closeout, right? But if that doesn't happen, then closeout becomes this long exercise for you and for us, okay? So, and at the same time, because as I said, it will happen eventually, even if it's during closeout, it's very important that you have readiness. And during December, we'll do a workshop on readiness for closeout, but you got to make sure you review your participant files for completeness. You got to make sure you verify if completion and transition outcomes were confirmed for them. You got to confirm required documentation in IWRS. You got to resolve all your data discrepancies and flags in your monthly compliance report. And you have to coordinate with your grant manager on closeout requirements. This is all part of readiness for closeout, so that when closeout comes, you are good to go and it's not a last minute reactive effort. More importantly, okay, keep in mind that closeout is one of the metrics that carries money for Illinois Works. You earn a good amount of money by doing closeout. A percent of your grant is attached to closeout. So when you finish closeout, if you meet the closeout threshold, then you earn that money and we pay you for that, and on we go, okay? But anyway, so the lesson here, the best practice here is ensuring you are proactive and not reactive. Take advantage of the windows of opportunity you have to deal with issues instead of reacting. Any questions about this before we move on to the next one?
No questions in chat.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now, as I said, we're all human. Things happen in life, okay? For a lot of our participants, a lot of things happen in life, okay? There are certain things that you could do proactively to address situations they're facing. And the system allows flexibility for us to be able to address things as they happen, okay? Some of the key flags that you will see in your not only real life as you're dealing with your participants, but also in our monthly compliance reports is, the attendance is below the threshold, okay? So we have a particular attendance requirement, 75%. Monica or Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have to attend at least 75% of the time for every, for every module in order to be able to pass it, okay? If someone falls below that, then they're going to have to do makeup hours, okay? They miss because they had a doctor's appointment for their kid, completely understandable. Or they miss because something happened with their car, or they miss because, I don't know, they have a part-time job and they had to go into work. Something happens, life happens, right? You need to make sure that if they miss that threshold, that they do makeup hours. As I mentioned, some of the best practices that we've seen out there is Fridays. If they're not running programming on Fridays, they do Fridays for makeup sessions or makeup tests, or they do Saturday mornings. That works very well for a lot of the colleges that are in our network. Or they missed an assessment, right? They, for whatever reason, they missed an assessment, they missed the test, and they need to take it, or they actually failed the test and they're just struggling with shop math, right? They need some tutoring and then they retest. Those need to be made up, because if they don't pass all the modules, they cannot be completers. They need to be able to pass all the modules. It's something like you go to high school, right? And you get your curriculum and you're like, oh, I finished my 4th year, I'm ready to graduate, but you didn't pass all the courses. Well, if you didn't pass all the courses, you're not going to be able to graduate. You need to go to summer school before you graduate. Something similar happens with Illinois Works. You didn't have the attendance requirements, you didn't pass all the tests. You're going to have to make those up, and your program needs to be flexible enough to be able to allow for that to happen, but you need to ensure that that happens, right? Without that, then their certifications are in question. Most importantly, we cannot verify them as completers. Why is that so important? There are so many reasons why we need to be able to verify individuals as completers, okay? Let's talk about the individual, him or herself, okay? One is, without being a completer, they're not an official Illinois Works graduate. If they're not an official Illinois Works graduate, contractors that hire them cannot claim those graduates for compliance credits. All throughout the state of Illinois, hundreds of contractors are executing state-funded projects that need to comply with hiring Illinois Works graduates. But they can only use Illinois Works graduates to comply. And if someone did not successfully complete, meaning Illinois Works didn't say they were a completer, we are the ones that certify that they're a completer. If they're not a successful Illinois Works completer, that contractor cannot hire them to comply with that law that requires that they hire Illinois Works graduates. So that's one. Also, contractors cannot hire them to earn bid credits. Bid credits are the incentives that Illinois Works provides for contractors to hire and retain Illinois Works graduates. If they're not a completer, they are not able to earn bid credits on those individuals. Now, the individual may still, even if they didn't graduate from Illinois Works, may still be able to apply to an apprenticeship program and may actually be accepted to an apprenticeship program. That's fine and that's great, except that they're not Illinois Works graduates. So contractors cannot hire them for compliance credits and cannot hire them for bid credits. So what that means is that they're less competitive in the market in comparison to individuals that did graduate from the Illinois Works program that we were actually able to certify that they graduated, right? Now, for your program, there's a second part to it. If we are not able to certify them, we are not able to pay you for them being a completer. We can only give you what we call financial credit for a completer if we're able to verify that that individual is actually a completer, right? So that's very important. And in reality, most of our grantees do very well completing our graduates. Our completion rate is around 80% throughout the state of Illinois. It's actually one of the highest throughout the workforce development world in the state. 80% completion is very high. And it's because obviously, we make sure that we let you know what the issues are so you can address them. So, but it's vital that you address that, okay? Address that, missed assessments, missed attendance, failed tests, all of that. Make sure that they receive student support services. That's what we call student support services, and make sure that they receive it proactively, not at the end. Do it as they go so that it doesn't feel overwhelming to them. if they've missed too much, if they have failed too many tests, and you don't address them proactively, a lot of people will drop out of the program because they feel like they're too behind. Okay. Any questions or comments about this one in particular?
Hi, Norman. This is Dan. I would just like to clarify for everyone, the attendance thresholds are 80%, typically 80% per module. Some modules do require more than that. You had already brought up OSHA 10, for example. In that case, they, the participant would need to be there for at least the 10 hours. Depends on the number of required hours that the grantee had requested for that course. And then post assessments require a passing score of 70%.
Okay, great.
So
Thanks
80% attendance,
clarification.
70%.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I was sure I didn't have that one straight. Now, I will tell you, and this is very important for the grantees listening, I had a grantee once tell me, oh my God, 70% is too high for a passing grade for test, and 80% is too high for attendance requirements. And, I listened to him, and this was a few years ago, and I said, okay, well, this is a employment readiness program to be able to ensure they're ready and able to go into employment and do apprenticeship programs. I said, do you know of any employer that is willing to retain someone that only shows up to work 80% of the time? He stayed quiet. And I said, I personally don't know of any employer, even the ones that pay minimum wage, that if you only show up 80% of the required time, that you will be able to keep your job. So I said, from that perspective of employment readiness, it's probably too low. And then I said, 70% is actually a C. If we lowered it to 60%, that means that Illinois Works is willing to say our graduates can graduate out of Illinois Works all with D's. Are we willing to say that? If this is readiness for employment, if this is readiness for apprenticeship programs where they have to compete with other applicants, are we willing to say that a D is more than enough? I particularly used to be a college professor, and one of the things I can tell you is it will be very unfortunate. We're particularly serving women, minorities, veterans. It will be very disappointing to hear that we're willing to lower the bar for women, minorities, and veterans. Not a good idea, because they're going to face a lot of situations out there where nobody's going to be willing to give them a chance or lower the bar for them. What we need to do is prepare them for what they're going to face out there, prepare them for what the bar is, and ensure they can compete with other people. We spend the resources, the time, the effort to prepare them so that they can succeed and they can do very well. I have a lot of stories of my students when I used to teach where I never lower the bar. Instead, I prepare them for that. And some of them have done incredible things that I'm like impressed, incredibly impressed about what you do. So lowering the bar is not what our job is all about. For us, is preparing them for what they're going to be facing out there. That is really what we're all about. Okay. Any questions or comments before we move on to the next one?
No questions in chat.
Thank you, Jeff. Moving on to the next one. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about certifications, the key about certifications, right? Certifications, most people in our, that we encounter that will come to these programs, come with a high school diploma, come with a certificate, a GED, HiSET certificate, and that is a good credential. But unfortunately, in a world that we live in, that's a knowledge economy, that's not, it's not going to give you an ability to enter careers in high-paid sectors of the economy. In a meeting that we had with the Illinois Works Review Panel, which is a group of legislators that meet every quarter to review to see how we're doing with Illinois Works and its implementation. We invited 3 of the Illinois Works graduates that we recently had. They all had their certifications, and they are all right now apprentices in different apprenticeship programs. 2 of them are, one of them is with the electricians, IBW. Another one is with the iron workers. Another one is with the carpenters. And there was a 4th one that was going to come that was also a young lady that was accepted into the electricians. If you're going to break into construction in the trades, and all of these trades that I mentioned pay very well. Once they finish their apprenticeship programs, they'll be making 60, 75, some of them even 80 or $90 an hour, okay? With full benefits, pensions included. They will be doing well. These certifications are door openers for them. It lets employers, it lets apprenticeship programs know these individuals can go through some rigor and get the credentials they need to be able to succeed in construction in the trade. NCCR, MC3, ICCB, those are all construction certifications. Our graduates must have those certifications. First aid CPR tells employers these individuals can react to some emergencies they may have at a job site while they're in the field, right? OSHA 10 construction tells, employers that these individuals know the basic principles of construction safety to keep themselves safe as they perform their jobs. That reduces risk for the employer, but also for their team members. All of these certifications are vital, right? They're vital. Those certifications validate skills that they have in order to enter construction and the trades, right? They came here for careers. This is not an easy thing to do. Construction in the trades is not easy, but we want to make sure that they have the skills necessary and the certifications to be competitive for employers who are also looking at others and other individuals to hire. Why should they hire graduates of Illinois Works? Why should they do that? Well, we want to make sure that they are fully prepared, ready, and able to be hired and to enter apprenticeship programs. Best possible preparation. And the example that I use are college prep high schools, right? I don't know if these exist throughout the state. They certainly exist in Chicago, where I'm based. We have a lot of college preps, I was reading some of the reports. Lane Tech College Prep in Chicago, one of the best high schools in the city. Their college enrollment rate is 99% because they're a college prep high school. DePaul College Prep, one of the top private high schools in the city of Chicago, their enrollment, college enrollment is 100%. These are big high schools. Lane has 4,000 kids, and DePaul College Prep has almost 2,000 kids. I mean, that's very impressive. And it's because their ultimate focus is just preparing them for college so that when they're ready to apply, they can enroll them. Those kids can go to college and succeed. Well, 3 apprenticeship programs are like high schools that prepare for college. We prepare people to go into apprenticeship programs. That's what we do. And they need to have these certifications. They need to have the skills. They need to be ready and able. Any questions about that? And please, here's the best practice. Make sure they got those certifications while they were in your program. Trying to engage them later to come back so that they can retake their OSHA 10 or retake their first aid or finish a module of their NCCR, MC3, or ICCB certification. That's not a good idea. It's very difficult to do that once they disengage. So the best practice is ensuring that they get their certifications, they have them all by the time they finish the program. Any questions or comments?
None in chat.
Okay, great. Moving on to the next one. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about stipends. Okay, so stipends are a very important tool for our program. Okay, so Stipends are not wages, and I want to make sure that whenever you speak to individuals that are interested in your program, first of all, you should not recruit them on the basis of a stipend, okay? Not a good idea. When you recruit individuals on the basis of a stipend, you know, they're not there to go into construction in the trades. They may be there for the stipend. We've seen cases like that. And then it becomes a big deal once you took away $15 because they were late or they didn't attend that day or they didn't pass an assessment. It's a big deal. We've seen it all, okay? When it comes to stipends, it can get really messy. But here's what stipends are intended to do. Stipends are intended to help individuals as they go through our program. You know, there are a lot of individuals that used to work 2 part-time jobs. Now they can only work 1 because they have to attend this program. Well, our stipend can help them subsidize their expenses while they're in the program because they cannot work 2 part-time jobs, right? Or maybe, you know, because of attending this program, they need some other, you know, they're going to have to pay for gas or they're going to incur some other expense in order to attend the program. Understandable. Stipends are there to do that. Our stipends are very generous. We pay, as I mentioned in my calculation, about $4 or $5 million a year in stipends. So they help reduce financial barriers. They will definitely help you increase retention because if someone had to leave a part-time job to join this program, now they're not under pressure financially, you know, to go get another part-time job. It can help you with retention. It can also encourage attendance, and for sure, our stipends can help support performance. But again, they cannot be used as a recruitment tool. We've seen programs in the past that have used stipends as a recruitment tool, and then they end up with people that actually were there for the stipends. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example, true case, and probably if you were on the onboarding session, you heard about this case, but I personally came across a case where the grantee used stipends to recruit students into their program. There were 3 young men that were accepted into the program and they applied to the plumbers, okay, in Chicago. This was in Chicago. You know how difficult it is to get into the plumbers? It's very, very difficult, but they applied. As part of the program, they actually got accepted into the plumbers. And the 3 young men declined to join the plumbers apprenticeship program. So when I saw that in our system that they declined to enroll and they were not going to join the plumbers, I called the program administrator and I said, please clarify something for me. In Chicago, the plumbers, when they finish their apprenticeship program, make $95 to $100 an hour, full benefits, pension. I just noticed these 3 young men, they were very young, 20, 21 years old. I said they declined to participate. We pay for their application fees. We spent $10,000 on each of these individuals as being part of their program. So please tell me, why did they decline to participate in the plumbers? I saw their career assessment. It said that plumbing was one of the areas they wanted to go into. His response was, well, this community has a lot of need. We knew they didn't want to go into construction and the trades, but we allowed them into the program because then they each could get about $2,500 worth of stipends. And I said, well, that is so unfortunate because not only does it undermine the mission of Illinois Works, but they took seats into our program for people that really might have wanted to be plumbers. And if they would have gotten accepted to be plumbers, they would probably be right now in the apprenticeship program with the plumbers. Please, you cannot do that again because programs like Illinois Works are very generous and very supportive, but they can go away if that's what we're doing, right? If we're just handing out money because people want to join the program for the $2,500 they were getting with 0 interest in construction and the trades. I'm telling you, these are true stories, okay? Now, if properly used, they can really help you, okay? They can really help you with, you know, retaining your graduates and supporting them, right? but you absolutely need to make sure that your stipends are meeting policy. We utilize a performance-based stipend policy. You've got to make sure you follow it. There is a policy in the Illinois Works Grantee Manual. Please make sure you look at it. You are following policy when it comes to your stipends. You really absolutely need to make sure that the stipends you're paying are matching your attendance. You cannot pay stipends that don't match your attendance. You know, I've heard of actually an accelerator grantee that their stipends were not matching by a lot. When asked, why is it that your stipends do not match the attendance roster, the response of the program administrator was, well, you know, this person had a lot of needs, so I just gave her extra stipends. Unfortunately, that is not the way this works. If they have extra needs, make sure they receive wraparound services. You can refer them to other places in the community that I can offer them that assistance, but it shouldn't be, oh, I just gave them any extra money, hundreds of dollars extra because they had a lot of need. That is not the way stipends work, right? At the same time, you got to make sure it's properly documented. If you don't have the proper documentation and there's a monitoring event, those stipends may be disallowed. Not only that, when you submit them to our financial grant managers for payment, they may disallow them, right? Because you don't have the proper documentation for them. Your stipends must be able to withstand monitoring and audit. And as I mentioned, this is the only legally required wraparound services. All of the other services we offer are whatever is needed by the individuals, but stipends are legally mandated. So as a result, we're going to be watching those very closely because we spend millions of dollars paying for stipends. Any questions or comments related to stipends? You guys have been very quiet today, so questions or comments?
None in chat, Dr. Roano.
Thank you, Jeff. Moving on to the next one. Okay, let's talk a little bit about transition, because this is really where Illinois Works is very, very different than other workforce development models, okay? Because our ultimate goal is to ensure that our graduates make careers in construction and the trades, transitioning individuals from training into apprenticeship programs, into employment, it's fundamental, okay? We will never get to the primary outcome of getting them to do a career in construction and the trades if your transitioning is done, you know, in a very short period of time, or if it's done after the graduate finishes, or it's not done at all. I can tell you it's not going to happen without a very proactive and strategic approach. As a result, you already know that you're required to have a transition coordinator that works for your program. And the way that your transition coordinator should be working with your participants is from the very beginning. Your transition coordinator should be part of your orientation. When you are doing orientation for your participants, your transition coordinator should start there, because you have to relate, you have to create a relationship with these individuals to understand what their career goals are, to be able to create career plans for them, to be able to support them, okay? So which registered apprenticeship programs are they interested in, you know? If they are really interested in construction, they're gonna have an idea, okay? And those should be documented in their career assessment. Which employers, as a result, which employers and apprenticeship programs is your transition coordinator gonna target to understand them, to see what they need? Do they have any needs? So that they can start doing matching for their graduates and participants. Who are the contacts at those places, right? Who should they be talking to? If it's a registered apprenticeship program, who's the business manager? Who's the director of the registered apprenticeship program? Who should they be talking to? Who should they be relating to? The other thing is they should be preparing them, make sure that they have an adequate and business-oriented resume. You should see the types of resumes that we see in IWRS for our graduates. If a resume is your business card, if your resume is what speaks for you to an employer that is hiring, your resume needs to be very polished. It needs to be done in very particular ways. That's the reason why we have guidance in the Illinois Awards Grantee Manual around resumes, because we have seen some resumes that we cannot even put them in front of employers when we get employers reaching out to career services wanting to hire our graduates. Your transition coordinator needs to find out about the application. When is it that they're opening? What is the process? Can they apply online? Can they only apply in the office? Is it a manual application? Is it an electronic application? How much is it, right? When is it that you have to apply? And your transition coordinator needs to have that knowledge and capability so that they can share that information with your participants. If someone just wants to be a laborer, have them also apply to other ones, because it's just like college, right? You apply to 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 1 takes you, 2 take you. Once you're in there, you can move around. And the same thing happens in construction and the trades, right? What's really important here is it needs to be strategic. It needs to be proactive. It cannot be reactive, and it needs to happen from the very beginning. I think I mentioned earlier in our previous meeting that some of the best grantees that we see out there successful with transitioning is they schedule times during their program of when their participants are going to apply to apprenticeship programs. Let's say a Wednesday at 9 a.m., they bring out the laptops. Okay, which program are you going to apply to? They apply right there and then, right? Because by doing that, by maximizing the number of times they apply, our participants have a better chance of getting accepted, but also you have an opportunity to secure the documentation that you need to prove that they applied to apprenticeship programs. What's next after this? Well, next after this is a long, long process, right? Career Services is there to coordinate with transitions coordinators at each of the grantees, to work with apprenticeship programs, to work with employers, to look for opportunities for our graduates. After your graduates, Career Services for up to 10 years, or until they become a journey person, will be reaching out to our graduates to find out how we can support them in their trajectory to entering construction and the trades. And then they will circle back if our career specialist finds out that one of your graduates needs assistance with different things, applying to another apprenticeship program or getting some type of license they need in order to apply, or they need some prep for the testing, or they need some mock interviews or whatever. Our career specialist will create, a career plan that will be sent to your your transitions coordinator for you to work with that graduate. Even if that individual graduated a year ago or 2 years ago, they will send it to you to support that individual so that that individual can be successful, okay? That's the way the system works, and that is the reason why transitioning is so vital, because without transitions and transitions coordinators, we're not going to be able to get outcomes for Illinois Works, which then puts in question why this program should exist, right? Any questions about that? So the best practice here is ensure transitions services start from the very beginning and that they're done proactively. Second best practice is make sure your transition coordinators really works with our career services team, because you have a career services specialist assigned to you so that they can coordinate for the success of that graduate. Melissa, you had a question or a comment?
I just wanted to provide a comment, some things that we've done that are really working. Our transition coordinator is working with his career services contact and making sure that we're on point, and we've created a master list of all of the registered apprenticeship programs we're already meeting with, working with, and also their timeline, whether they accept monthly, whether sponsorship is required, so that the entire team knows how. But one of our first employability skills classes that we did do is we taught on professional email addresses, and then had them bring their current resumes, or if they didn't have a resume, and we addressed that early so that we could make sure that their resumes were on point, and they had time as part of our content to update that and make sure they had the digital skills to apply online. So we included that in our curriculum early in our schedule, in our curriculum schedule. And so that has been working.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Melissa. I love that. one of the key things about, about being able to be gainfully employed and make a career is to really have the skills that employers are looking for, right? Nowadays, without having digital skills, being able to use technology, being able to write professional emails, it's very difficult, right? I mean, it's very difficult. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing that, right? And these are all skills. As I said, the ultimate goal that we have is to ensure our graduates can make a career in construction and the trades. That's ultimately what we want, right? We want to see more women, more veterans, more minorities in construction and the trades. We need to be able to prep them. We need to be able to make sure that they're ready and able, right? And without the skills that Melissa mentioned, it's very difficult to do that. Anybody else has any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on to the next one, Jeff. Okay, so when it comes to applying to apprenticeship programs, right? As I mentioned, Illinois Works as a performance-based model. So it's very important that you document what you're doing with them, right? If they submitted an application, make sure that you have evidence that they submitted an application. We have a lot of grantees that when they schedule, people to apply for apprenticeship programs while they're in the program, and let's say Wednesday morning, they're applying for apprenticeship programs, they're able to secure all the evidence they need to show that those participants actually apply, right? So it's important for you to keep that in mind. Application is key, but having the documentation and the evidence is also key, right? If you completed interviews with them, you prep them for interviews, make sure you document that, right? Recruiter conversations, right? Application status, orientation attendance, referral emails. We should be able to document all of this. What is it that we're doing with our graduates so that they can be successful? It wouldn't be good for us to say, well, they graduated, they're on their own, right? A lot of times colleges do that. Not a good practice, right? Because a lot of times the graduates then struggle. We really need to work strategically with them and with our career services team to ensure that they're receiving the services, but also that we're documenting what we're doing with them, right? If the services are being delivered, then we should document them, because otherwise we deliver services that are nowhere to be found. You will hear from your programmatic managers that will tell you if something is not documented in IWRS, it didn't happen, right? And the reason why they emphasize that is because it's only through what's documented in IWRS that we can verify things. Outside of that, things might have happened, but we cannot verify them. We have no visibility. As a result, from the perspective of Illinois Works as a performance-based model, if it's not documented and we cannot verify it, it didn't happen. So when it comes to applying for apprenticeship programs, this is vital. Here's the other thing that I will say. We still, as we speak, have about 30% of Illinois Works graduates that never applied to an apprenticeship program. Why? If those individuals actually came because they wanted to do a career in construction and the trades, why have they not applied to an apprenticeship program? Is it because the grantee didn't facilitate the application process? Is it because they changed their mind? It's hard to believe that 30% of our participants changed their mind. Maybe some of those are what we call mismatches, meaning someone that was not supposed to be accepted that was accepted. I get that, but 30% is still a high number. We have to work really hard to ensure all the graduates of Illinois Works apply to at least 3 apprenticeship programs, ideally between 3 to 5, okay? Moving on to the next slide, Jeff. And I know that we are coming on time. How many slides do we have left, Jeff?
Let me see. We have about roughly 20, 18, 20.
And this is 13?
17.
17. Okay, so we only have a handful. Okay, if you're asking about what's evidence for an apprenticeship program that an application actually happened, an application confirmation is definitely evidence. Application confirmation, obviously, it needs to come from the actual apprenticeship program indicating that they are such and such, and that such and such individual applied for the apprenticeship program. Maybe a receipt showing that an application fee was paid. In the past, we used to get these handwritten receipts that didn't say anything. It just said $50 application fee, but who, from where, which program, for what participant, right? A notice of testing is also a good example, because once you apply, they may send you a notice for testing for the next step in the application process. A letter or email from the registered apprenticeship program confirming that the individual applies. Some programs do that, right? Documentation, the individual is on a registered apprenticeship program waiting list. We've seen a lot of those. A lot of programs provide that. Or a sponsorship letter from an employer sponsoring an individual into the apprenticeship program. So there's a variety of ways that you can use for, as evidence that they have applied to an apprenticeship program. Your transition coordinator should have relationships with those apprenticeship programs, so that if you need evidence or you need any type of document, if you have a relationship, you ask them, they will provide those. We've seen that all the time, okay? So this documentation protects both the participants and you, the grantee. For the participant, we know that they've applied to an apprenticeship program. The more they apply, the better chance they have. But for you, that's evidence that we need to be able to verify a primary preliminary transition, right? And as you know, in our model, we pay a good amount of money for primary preliminary, and then we pay also a good amount of money for a primary final, okay? So if you want to learn more about this, you can go to our grantee section 13, page 231 and 232. The next slide, Jeff. Okay, let's talk about closeout. As I have been mentioning, closeout is going to be important for you moving forward. We talked about renewals already, but here are some of the practices that are key. We're trying to start you already thinking about closeout so that you can be ready by the time we kick off that process at the beginning of December. First, don't wait until the end of the grant to review your participant files. And when we talk about participant files, we're talking about, you're required to enter data in IWRS, but you're also required to have a participant file. There's a participant file checklist in the grantee manual that you should use to organize those files. Make sure that you have the documents that you need. When we do a monitoring event, and you can expect generally to be monitored once a year by Illinois Works. When we do a monitoring event, we want to see those participant files, okay? Missing or incomplete attendance documentation. Again, if you have missing or incomplete attendance documentation, either in IWRS or your participant files, we can assure you we're going to flag that for you, because as I mentioned earlier, attendance really drives a lot of things for Illinois Works. Missing certifications or required completion documentation. So if you're missing a driver's license, or if you're missing the high school, high school diploma or GED certificate, and we're going to flag it also in our monthly compliance, but during closeout, that's going to become a big deal. Okay, you need to have, if you accepted people that did not show residents in the state of Illinois, that becomes a big deal for us. If you accepted people that were not 18 years of age, that's a big deal for us, unless they're in a high school-based program, which follows different guidance from Illinois Works. But it's very important that you have all of those documents. No documents or evidence of applications into apprenticeship programs or transition activities. As I mentioned, in our Illinois Works model, transitioning is vital. Our workforce development model is upside down. We start with the transition first. How do we give them an outcome? How do we enroll them in a career in construction and the trades? And then from there on, we move. Other models start with everything else except that. We focus on that primary outcome as the reason for us existing. And then the other thing that is also very important, and I will tell you, this is really a best practice, ensure your IWRS records, the data you enter in IWRS matches the documentation that you have in the participant files and other documentation. When it doesn't match, it will most likely trigger a monitoring event, even an audit, okay? So I really would encourage you to ensure that the data you're entering in IWRS really matches your participant files, your backup documentation, okay? Any questions or comments about those things? Okay, so coordinating with career services, okay? It's vital that you really develop a good relationship, particularly your transitions coordinator. You know, coordinate with them a variety of things. First of all, there's going to be a career job fair. You are required to coordinate with them. Make sure that you're working with them to ensure that's a successful event. Make sure that you're coordinating with them other career and transition services, right? Our career specialists are required to reach out to apprenticeship programs. They're required to reach out to employers looking for job opportunities, sponsorship opportunities for our graduates. Make sure that your graduates are ready and able, right? Make sure that they have good resumes, you know, ready and able when we are doing job matching for employers looking for our graduates. Make sure that you prep them for interviews, okay? They're ready to do an interview because it's still a competitive process, right? Make sure that if you don't know how to relate to a particular employer or how to access them, coordinate with our career services. Maybe both of you can call on a particular employer or ask our career services, there a particular contractor here in the area I should be working with, or can you introduce me to one of those? Make sure that the job matching, when you receive a job order from our career specialist, make sure you are proactively responding to it. You're putting forward your best graduates, because that same job order is going to other grantees in your area. So your graduates are competing with other graduates to have an opportunity to go in front of that employer, okay? And then again, find out about, you know, even with career services, find out if they know what the requirements are for particular apprenticeship programs or when they're accepting, you know, work together with them to learn about apprenticeship programs in your communities, because the whole state of Illinois has a career specialist, an Illinois West career specialist assigned to it to work not only with the grantees, but with the employers and the apprenticeship programs in the community. It's vital that, you know, that happens, you know, career specialists. And here's one key for you. Please invite your career specialist to speak to your participants. Maybe not during orientation, but maybe the second or third or fourth time or the second week in your program, invite them to speak to them, okay? Because career services will be following up with your graduates. They will be following up to 10 years and offering them services and learning about them, what they need, what they want, okay? And the more they know about career services, the easier it is for us to engage them once we engage with them. So please invite them. They may not be able to attend, you know, and be there face to face. Sometimes they will be able to, but hey, through WebEx, or through Zoom, they can speak to your graduates, right? So that your graduates know who career services is and the services they offer, okay? Next, Jeff. Okay, so, I imagine, Jeff, that this is the last slide.
Dr. Rana, though, those were additional slides. So we have about 15 slides left.
15 slides left?
Yes.
Oh, wow, that cannot be. So these are external Illinois Works partnerships. Here's one thing I will tell you, okay? And probably the biggest thing that I have learned about Illinois Works is the most successful Illinois Works providers are the ones that have been able to develop partnerships with local apprenticeship programs in their communities. In Chicago and the metro area, it's a huge world out there, but I'm going to give you a tool that you can use to find out who those apprenticeship programs are in your community. If you go to the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program website, on the DCO website, all the way at the bottom, you're going to find a heat map, okay? That heat map was created as a tool for our career services. It's also created as a tool for your transitions coordinators, okay? The map itself, if you enlarge it, if you look at the squares, there are yellow squares on the map. That map, those yellow squares are the apprenticeship programs in your communities, okay? If you click on the square, you're gonna be able to see all the information for that apprenticeship program. You're going to be able to see their website. We even have phone numbers, addresses there. You could, your transition coordinators can do some research on those apprenticeship programs. I really encourage you to look for that information, find it, develop relationships with them, okay? Who are they? Who is present in your communities? Who are the apprenticeship coordinators or directors, okay? Relate to the workforce partners in your area because they have relationships with employers. Relate to a variety of employers, large, medium, small contractors, and other employers in your community. Who are the union representative? Where are the hiring halls? Who are the business managers for that, right? Just develop a good understanding of that landscape in your community, because the more you develop that understanding, the more successful you are going to be in developing relationships that ultimately are the ones that offer opportunities for placements and outcomes for your graduates, right? That's all the job of your transitions coordinators, of your program managers, to ensure that they can really have an understanding of the landscape and develop relationships. Moving on to the next slide, Jeff. You know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we really have to think about what is it that employers are looking for, right? Employers are looking for some basic stuff. Will they show up to work? 80% of the time showing up is not good for them. Can they pass certification and training they provide? Are they work ready? Can they work in teams with others? Can they communicate, follow instructions? Can they communicate their supervisor, their superintendent? Do they understand the culture of these job site of construction, right? Can they work together with other teams? They're going to be assigned to various teams as they do different work in the field. That's really what an employer is looking for, right? Can they do that? Our job is to prepare them to ensure that we can say yes to all of those questions as they are getting ready to enter construction in the trade. So please make sure your programs do that, right? Moving on to the next one. So as I mentioned before, documentation is vital for Illinois Works. We need to make sure this is what we do. Document, 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 completed, apply, transition, career fair, employer training. We really need to make sure that documentation is provided, given that we're a performance-based model and that we do verifications. Moving on. So I mentioned there is a process for closing out. You know, we start, you know, this is the timeline for that. Make sure that you proactively file that or follow the process. We will start a closeout activities. We'll kick it off in December and provide a timeline, but I just want you to know that this process takes, you know, I would say it takes a good 90 days from December all the way to March when we finish. One thing that you should know that is important about closeout is that once we finish closeout activities, we have to publish a report about your program on our website. And there's a lot of people that look at those reports. Okay, a lot of stakeholders that are both in favor and against Illinois Works looking at those reports, asking questions about why certain grantees are being funded if they have such and such performance. So please keep in mind that not only are we looking about what you did with our program, the public is looking at what you do, and that closeout process is what allows us to collect all the information that we need to make that report public. Moving on to the next one, Jeff. Renewal. As I mentioned earlier, when you do renewal, you will be offered an opportunity either in September, October, November to renew. You need to meet a certain threshold to be offered renewal. So it's simple. The more enrollments, completions, transitions you have, the higher your compliance score, the more probability for renewal. And as I mentioned, there are two paths for renewal. One is renewal with conditions, and then the other one is removal without conditions as an accelerator. If you are renewed without conditions, you certainly will be able to graduate out of the accelerator program into a track 2, which is one of our regular tracks. If you are offered renewal with conditions, you will need to remain in the accelerator program for another year to then continue to develop to prep you to renew without conditions and be offered renewal in one of our regular tracks. Next one, Jeff. So, for success for Illinois Works, there are two types of angles to it, right? One is the participant success is they complete the required training, they earn the certifications, they complete attendance requirements, they apply for apprenticeship programs, they successfully transition to those apprenticeship programs, they obtain employment, and ultimately what we want to see is that they become journey people. We have already documented that close to 50 of our Illinois Works graduates that graduated in 2022 have already become journey people in different trades. It takes anywhere between 3 to 6 years to finish an apprenticeship program. So we are steadily seeing Illinois Works graduates from 2022 finishing their apprenticeship programs. That is success for them, right? They enter an apprenticeship program, they obtain employment, they become journey people. What is success for you? You enter information in IWRS accurately, you do monthly compliance, you really check those flags, you address them, you complete participant documentation, make sure you have all the necessary documentation, your performance outcomes are met, you met your enrollment, completion, transition, and your closeout performance outcomes, you successfully close your grant, and then you have a strong renewal position. Ideally, you renew without conditions so that on you go, and then you can be part of Illinois Works for however long you wanna do it. Next slide, Jeff. Okay, best practices for hiring for high performing programs. This is what we typically see with our programs that operate in Track 1 with 80, 90, 100% compliance scores. They monitor their data on a weekly basis to make sure that they're entering the data and the data they're entering is accurate according to the guidance. They continuously review participant files to make sure that if there's anything missing, they know what's missing, so they address it so that when closeout time comes, they are ready to go. They religiously track those registered apprenticeship program applications, really ensure that those participants are applying and that they have the evidence that they know provides evidence that they have applied. They solve problems before graduation. As I mentioned, once someone disengages, it's very hard for them to come back and deal with issues. They also make sure that they proactively meet and they're constantly talking to each other, the different team members that are working on this program, be it wraparound services or transition services or data entry or your instructors, that there's constant communication. They're working as a team. They also engage employers and apprenticeship programs very early on, developing those relationships, knowing what their needs are so that they can start doing transitioning for their graduates. And as importantly, they document everything, right? Enter case notes, enter the required information, communicate with your grant manager, really document things and let us see those documents and be very proactive about that communication. Next one, Jeff. Okay, here are some accountability things that are important, who should be in charge of ensuring that you have those connections with the employer's career services? Who should be in charge of ensuring that your data in IWRS is current and accurate? Your data entry coordinator, right? Who should make sure that your participants are learning and getting their certifications? Obviously, your instructors. That's the reason why they're engaging with them. The administrators, you're managing risk. You're making sure that guidance is being followed, making sure people are fully trained. You have the appropriate team members. They're trained, they're capable. Student support services, who's watching over this to make sure makeup hours are happening, makeup testing is happening. And again, who is making sure that they're applying to apprenticeship programs, your transition coordinators. If you have a team and they're all accountable for what they're supposed to be doing, you have a high probability for success. Next one, Jeff. Okay, so would this participant be ready in B mark as completion and transition You use the chat to say yes, not yet, so you tell me. Let's go on to that case study, Jeff. So student A, they completed all classroom instruction, attended 87%. They missed the 10 hours of training due to illness. They got their OSHA 10, they got their core NCCER, they passed all the required assessments, they received all eligible stipends, resumes are completed, attended the Illinois Works Career Fair, applied to 2 registered apprenticeship programs, 1 application confirmation email is saving in their file, makeup hours have not been completed, IWRS attendance has not been updated for the final week. Is this person ready to be certified as a completer? Yes or no? Use the chat. So of those individuals that say no, all of you say no, why not? Someone unmute your line. Why aren't they ready?
One thing I don't see is the first aid CPR required certification. I don't see that that's completed.
Okay. What else?
The
Great.
makeup
Great.
hours were not completed.
Makeup hours were not completed. How about the rosters? The last point.
Yeah, even though they've been to 80%, we don't know how much that last week was, so we don't know if they're gonna hit the if that 80%, if the 87% will go below the 80% threshold.
Yeah, that's right. So there you go. You got to complete the makeup hours. You have to verify the final attendance, as you mentioned. You have to update IWRS and confirm participant record is complete. You see, if you do all of this, you have a solid Illinois Works verifiable completer. You're done with that. They move on to doing transitioning career services. They move on to do all of that. But it's important. You've done most of it. Let's just finish the last loose ends, right? What process would your organization use to implement, to catch any of this, any of you? How can you ensure that you catch this?
That's when your data quality procedure or policy comes in, how you're evaluating and matching against what's already been completed and what's in IWRS.
Correct. That's exactly it, right? Do a checklist. Done, 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 not done, 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 not done, 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 not done. Simple process, right? Once that person finish the other items, make sure that it's done in a timely manner. If you finish it on your end and you caught it and dealt with those issues, guess what? Our programmatic grant manager is going to see it in IWRS. When they see it, there are no flags. They can certify your completion. So you're correct, Melissa. That data quality management system can catch all of this. Use a simple checklist to find out, and you can catch all of that. Okay. Next slide, Jeff. Which issues causes your organization the most difficulty? I can tell you, attendance tracking is, from our perspective, a big issue because it's legally mandated. Certifications are another one that causes some difficulties for people. As I was mentioned in the previous case, first aid CPR was not included there. Documentation, right? I mean, entering information that your documentation cannot back up. Register apprenticeship program applications. I've seen a lot of grantees say, we gave them $75 after they finished and they went to apply to a program, but they never brought us the receipt. Well, that probably was not the right process to follow. You should have made sure that they apply while they were still in the program so that the next time they came back to take class, they had a receipt, or your transition coordinator could have gone with them, gotten a receipt, or they could have applied electronically if allowed. You need to develop a process and system to make sure you have the documentation, right? The other thing is IWRS updates. And as I mentioned, if you did it, but it's not in IWRS, it didn't happen. We cannot verify it. We cannot ensure that guidance was followed. And then for sure, employer relationships. Without employer relationships, without apprenticeship program relationships, it doesn't work. We need to ensure there are those proactively, okay? So tell me, which one would you say is the most difficult one, would cause you the most complications for your program, given your geography, given the participants that you're dealing with? Enter it in the chat. Is it attendance tracking? Is it certifications? Is it documentation? Which one will cause your organization the most difficulty? Someone said number 5. Someone said number 5, IWRS updates. Someone said number 4, register apprenticeship programs. Anybody else? Aaron, tell us why number 5.
Well, just that was what on our first compliance check we thought we had everything all good, but we got 4 of our 13. So, but it was, 7 of the ones we missed were all the same thing, like clicking a button and wraparound services. So just some of the small things. Is that what you mean by IWRS updates when we're updating the information on our end?
Correct.
Yeah.
So would you say, Aaron, that if you had a tight data quality management system, you could have caught it before?
Yes. So what had happened is our student services and wraparound coordinator started being helpful in uploading things. And our data manager went back and looked at some stuff, and we thought that we had, yes. So it was, if we had stuck to our plan, we probably would not have been in that situation.
Because you would have caught it earlier, right?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't something that, it was someone else had put something in the system, which he had access to it and he thought he was doing what he was supposed to do. But since she hadn't put it in, it wasn't, I don't know why it wasn't showing up. But yes, it was, if we could have done that. But yeah, just the IWS reporting in general, I think, is probably our biggest bear in all of this.
So one thing I will tell you in terms of best practice is think about IWRS as visibility into what you're doing to your programmatic grant manager and your financial grant managers, particularly your programmatic grant manager, right? So if that becomes an afterthought or is not a priority, you're doing a lot of things that we cannot see. And in a performance-based model where verification is important, we need to be able to see that, right? So it's important to really have it as a top priority. I always tell data entry coordinators they're one of the most important people for their team, and they are, because they're letting us see their stuff, right? So that's important. Now, number 4, Melissa, tell us why number 4 is a challenge.
One of the things I look at is which things do we have the most control over, and then where is our control depending on external systems. And with the registered apprenticeship applications, that's where we are assisting, but sometimes the confirmations and things are not under our direct control. And so managing that, so we receive that from our students immediately and tracking that. That's why I was looking at that. Many of the other things we have more direct control over the reporting of it. But number 4, we have to depend on our students as well to make sure that they're getting us, the confirmation that these things are done.
Certainly, and you're correct. That's a third party, right? Providing verification that you need, and that's where it can get complicated, right? That's the reason why it's so important for the transition coordinator to develop relationships with those apprenticeship programs, so that if there's a document or some type of verification you need, you can reach out to that business manager or that director of training at those apprenticeship programs to be able to get it, right? But we understand coming from the outside as a third party is one of the challenges that requires very focused attention and time to be able to make it happen, right? Thanks for sharing. We appreciate you sharing and engaging. Next, Jeff. So what would you say in terms of action planning that you would improve related to attendance, given what I have mentioned about best practices with rosters and ensuring they're fully accurate, whatever you say, and Illinois Works needs to be backed up by your roster. Tell us, what would be one thing that you would improve about your attendance? Put it in the chat. If you don't need to improve, if you have great attendance, say nothing because we're doing great. But if you do, need to improve in that area, how would you make sure that your rosters are accurate and really reflect what's happening there so that they match stipends, they match what you're entering in IWRS? Anybody? Aaron said that they're doing good with attendance. That's great. One of the key pillars of Illinois Works, because of it, how it operates, is that attendance, right? Someone else mentioned, Dominic said that you have attendance under control. That's great, Dominic. Anybody else? We reviewed attendance daily. You see, this is a good thing. Melissa mentioned we review attendance daily. That is definitely something good that you're doing, Melissa, because attendance is one of those things that if you leave it for the week later or 2 weeks later, who remembers, right? There are so many numbers, so many things happening. Reviewing attendance every day is important. When I used to teach, I would look at my roster. I had to keep a roster for the college, and I would look at my roster. And before I dismissed the students, if there was any questions or any issues, I would address them right there and then, because the next time I saw them, I would forget, they would forget, we didn't know what was going on. Dealing with it on time right there and then is what really did it for me, and I recommend you do something similar. We implemented a spreadsheet of hours, keep track of it, and so that we can make sure that they meet the 80% criteria. That sounds good, James. Just want to make sure that the roster itself is properly documented with the instructor and that the instructor is certifying the hours, right? Okay, great. So that's with regards to attendance. How about documentation? What do you make sure that you're doing to make sure you have the right documentation? Are you keeping a checklist? What is it that you're doing to make sure you have the proper documentation? GED certificates, high school diplomas, driver's license, what is it that you're doing to ensure that you have the proper documentation, the required documentation, and that you keep them in the files, in the student file, and then upload whatever you're required to upload? Anybody wants to share there? Quality assurance of the files, that's great. Definitely. Files are important, right? Once everything is there, 3 years later, someone says you're going to go through a monitoring event, you just pull the files and you show them, right? Got to make sure they're complete. You got to make sure you kept them up. It's 3 years later, you're trying to clean them up by then, it's too late, right? Melissa said, meet with the grant manager and ask more questions before implementing. That's good. If you have questions about what should be in those files, ask your programmatic grant manager. You have an internal spreadsheet, files in a cabinet, data specialists make sure everything is printed and is there and secure. Okay, great, Aaron. You have a checklist, Dominic said. Yeah, these are all great practices you're following to make sure that you have the appropriate documentation. As I said, it's too late once a monitoring event happens, or you're like, oh, I'm gonna try to find it now. It's just way too late, right? It should be done as it happens, right? As it happens, take care of it, and then you should be all good. Well, thank you very much for participating there. Anything else we have left?
This is the last slide, Dr. Rano.
Okay, great. So again, the success for Illinois Works is not how many people graduate or how many people we start, how many people we touch. The success for Illinois Works is how many of them successfully started a career in construction. That's it. That's all we do. Construction and the trades. Big impact on the lives of people, big impact on their families and their communities. But that's our success. And we need to be able to demonstrate that success, right? So we document, report, document to do that. Illinois Works is one of the best programs, pre-apprenticeship programs in the nation. We are considered a best practice model by USDOL, by USDOT. We're very proud of what we do. But we can only sustain this into the future, spending the $25, $30 million we spend a year if we're able to deliver on these outcomes. And that's success for us, right? People starting a sustainable career in construction and the trades. We complete people, we transition them, we document, you get renewed, and on we go. We got to continue to do this for the benefit of our state, for the benefit of the participants we serve. We cannot do it without you, and we need to make sure that we do it the right way. So, Jeff, are we moving into evaluation then?
Yes, we are. So I can take it from here, Dr. Ruano. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I know we went a little bit over. Appreciate you staying with it. We do want to collect your feedback. So if you would reply to the Mentimeter that you should see in the multimedia viewer on the right hand of your WebEx if you're using a laptop. If you're calling in from a phone or using another device, you can use the link that is being, I'll drop into chat here. You can just click that link and it'll take you right out to the Mentimeter. And we're going to just answer a few questions as we always do to get your feedback. So the first question I'd like to ask you is around how you view this meeting and kind of the takeaways that you have from this. So what are your views on this meeting? Rate from 1 is the lowest and 10 is the highest. To what extent did this meet your expectations? I know it's a small group here, but it looks like we have about, I think 3 or 4 grantees and 5 maybe in the call. So if you would, I'd like to hear from all of you about this, and we'll get through these questions quickly. So again, appreciate your time. This is how we measure our success too, is to know if we're delivering on what you need. Thank you for those that responded. It looks like we got 3 of 8. Again, if you would click that link, come on in. So to what extent it meet expectations? How likely to attend? Thank you. Okay, great. We got the 4 there. We're going to move ahead. So this meeting was relevant to what you wanted to learn about the subject matter. Obviously, it's a community of practice, learning from each other, kind of hearing each other's thoughts. And we have a lot of content that we cover as well, a lot of things to cover. So one from, was this meeting relevant about the subject matter? 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree. I do know that sometimes the way Mentimeter shows these is different. So you will have a chance if you do disagree. We obviously do care and want to hear about it as well. But if you just hit the wrong button, that happens from time to time. Everybody go in and put their answers in. It looks like we're getting got 3 of the 8 again. Okay, 4 of 8. We're going to move ahead then to our next question. I plan to apply what I learned today. Hopefully you do. Again, and check and read, make sure it's from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Do you plan to use? I mean, this is all application oriented, so we hope you do take this and immediately apply the things that were covered. It's great to be able to hear from Dr. Ruano and kind of cover these key issues. So hopefully you felt you can get some application out of this. Again, we want to hear from everybody. Thank you for those responses. So now this is, what improvements might you recommend to today's content? Do you have any suggestions you'd like to see for our next community of practice? Because we're not done. This is, we've got more ahead. So if you have any suggested improvements, we want to hear from you, and we will try to work those into our future sessions. So please let us know what you're thinking. And this is an open text. You can just put NA in there if you don't have anything you'd recommend. But again, if you have any there, some case examples. Good. You like those? Yep. I'm glad to hear that. We definitely can do that. If you have no suggested improvements, if you just type NA, that way I know I've given you time to answer that question. That helps me keep things moving along. Training on IWRS. Also, remember you have tech support with IWRS through your grant manager. Call that out, but that's good. And also the trainings from past IWRS sessions are online. If you need to go back and reference those are on the partner guide. So that last question, what did you find effective if we would make any changes? Is there anything you'd recommend we keep? Anything particular that you found most effective in today's presentation? What kind of stood out to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you don't have anything specifically that you want to call out, again, you can just hit NA or none. That's fine. But if you have something that you're like, boy, that was really enjoyed that, we will try to make sure we keep those in future sessions as well. So the examples gave you a lot of feedback. Yeah, it's nice having somebody that's very, knows the program inside and out, can throw all kinds of examples in. Keep the focus on the required metrics for closeout. Great. Thank you so much for that feedback, what you wanted to keep. And this is the very last question. Is there anything else about this community of practice that you think we should know? Anything else you'd want to make sure we hear Just the last, anything I didn't cover, that kind of a question. So NAs, no's coming in. All right, I feel like we've heard from, again, if you haven't had a chance to respond, please go ahead and do that. I do want to get everybody. And with that, we're going to wrap this up. I do want to say thank you for everyone for your time and participation. Thank you, Dr. Arano, for joining and making your time available for the community. Anything last comments you'd like to make, Dr. Arano, before we end it?
Yeah, no, so I just wanted to close by saying that, I'm a teacher and a coach at heart. I love doing that. I did that for 10 years. I really enjoyed it, and that's what I like to do. And I enjoy these conversations, being able to share practical knowledge and best practices and being able to learn from each other. I love some of the techniques being used out there, some of the things that are being used. Let's keep it up. We'll give you another date and time when we're going to be meeting. Thanks, Jeff, for the support and the rest of the Illinois West team for joining. Thank you very much for all the grantees for joining. I hope you found this to be very productive. I definitely enjoy this and find it to be very productive so that we can all level set and make sure we're on the same page, share the knowledge we have so that we can all be successful. Always keep in mind, the success of your graduates, the success of your programs is our success, is the success of my team, of myself, PD, Jeff, is the success of the state of Illinois, is the success of Governor Pritzker. So we really appreciate your support and your help, and let's keep it up. Thank you.